We are facing a danger at this moment. There is a danger of making this gathering not visible, of making this forum non-existent due to tensions and to diplomatic foreign questions involving governments. We have to make clear that this forum exists. There are enormous logistic difficulties. We are far away from Beijing. But what you exists. There are women gathered here. There is a powerful discourse being built here. And there is no way of building an agenda for women only with governmental decisions taken in a governmental conference. Thank you very much.
My dear sisters from all over the world, friends,
尊敬的来宾，来自世界各地的姐妹们、朋友们。
The event we have all prepared for the last 2 years has finally arrived.
我们为之筹备了2年的时刻，终于来到了。
The labors of all of you and the thousands of other women all over the world have led us to this wonderful moment.
所有你们和世界各地成千上万的姐妹们的努力，使我们迎来了这样一个激动人心的时刻。
It is fitting that we begin our coming together with a celebration.
我们将用舞蹈和音乐来庆祝我们的相聚。
And now, as Executive Director of the NGO Forum on Women, it is my great pleasure and honor to declare our celebration open. And now, our sisters from Africa, Asia and the Pacific, the Arab region, Europe, North America, Latin America, and the Caribbean will call all of us to this gathering.
The forum itself is an event which is open to anyone, any woman in the world, and there are a few men as well, who are NGOs, that is non-governmental organizational women, civil society women. And this is happening overlapping with the UN conference, which is the 4th World Conference on Women. It's not a conference for women per se, it's a conference on women. And the difference is that we feel that women's issues are not simply the concerns of women, but they're everyone's concern, because if it's not appropriate for women, as the saying goes, it's not appropriate. The 4th World Conference on Women is a follow-up of the Nairobi Conference, which was held in 1985 in Nairobi, Kenya. And the document that came out of that World Conference on Women was called the Forward-Looking Strategies for the Advancement of Women. So this conference, the UN conference in Beijing, is a follow-up of that 85 conference to take a look at what advances really have been made in the past decade. How have women's situations improved all over the world? And in fact, the answer is that the situation for women has not improved. The Cold War has ended, but we have a world situation where it's really far more dangerous than it was before.
Women from all over the world have arrived there with great hopes and expectations. Several plenary sessions are being held, workshops were held, and there are innumerable women here from every part of the world. Let's hope we reach a consensus on the rights of the women, on equality, development, and peace. I am from Pakistan, Begum Masooda Jawad, from All Pakistan Women's Association.
I agree with those who claim that ethnic cleansing was at the root of this latest Balkan war and not just a mere consequence of the war. Women's bodies are once again battlefields for big ideas, huge historical fights, and the ultimate proof of male dominance over his male enemy and his property, women's body. In that sense, the difference between former Yugoslavia and other ex-socialist countries in transition is enormous. But nevertheless, there are some structural similarities. The most visible one is the worsening of women's social and economic status. As Upendra Bakshi has said, the wall of Berlin fell on the bodies of women. Women are the losers. They disappeared from paid labor, violence against women is increasing, they are losing previously granted rights such as the right to free choice, legal and safe abortion, right to free health care and social security for themselves and their children. They are not involved in decision-making processes. They've lost their previous rights to at least legally and formally guaranteed equal wages. They are not significantly present in the newly appearing class of the new owners. The bureaucratic oppression and exclusion of women in patriarchal and hierarchical socialism is replaced with the free enterprise spirit of competition, conflict, commercialism, and security. The new entrepreneurs greedily run after their first $1 million, and just in the same way, new would-be democratic leaders greedily run for power. As my friend Zorica Mršević, a feminist from Belgrade, says, state socialism is replaced with predatory capitalism.
The main problem for the women of our region is to realize all human rights for each woman. What does it mean? We are in the way of independence, in the way of the democracy, but we didn't teach the lessons of democracy. We have no the culture of democracy. That's why the women are so active in this way. They try to take part in the elections. They try to take part in the government.
It is a great honor for me to share with you Cambodian women's experience and our strategy toward governance with equal participation and recognition of women and men. As you know, after 2 decades of war and genocide and isolation from the world, Cambodia found a new beginning with the signing of peace accords among the parties in conflict, which led to a general election held in May 1993. Hungry of peace, Cambodian women and men went to the poll despite an atmosphere of political violence and fear. Of the 1995% of the voters who turned out, 55% are women. Cambodia now has a legitimate government, a national assembly, and a constitution. However, women in Cambodia have gained very little, as their representation at decision-making level is very limited.
Our constitution also guarantees the rights for men and women and equal rights as it is written. Well, you know that in reality is something else. And I thought, as long as in 1988, when the election came about in the north part of Yemen, we were denied the right to be candidates. So just in 1993, after the unification, being a candidate in itself is an achievement. And here where I found myself. I really tried to break that ceiling, and I won for the election. And I was among 21 candidates, and I do not represent a political party, but an independent. This is one of the things that I learned that women should not do. If you want to go in election, you better have a political party to support you, or else you're going to be very much alone. Anyway, the fight also was using everything, including the religion. So I thought, why not? Let's use it. If they are using it, let's use it. And religion also has been used. In 1988, where they deny us to be candidates, they have used the fatwa, Islamic fatwa, that says that women cannot go to the election. In 1993, when I ran, I went to the Mufti of the Republic, and I gave him just a nice question. I said, I am trying to run, and I have a team, and every time my team is trying to work, men and women around us tell us that this is not Islamic, and that I have no right to run in the election. What is your opinion, religiously speaking? So actually, he said, and I will quote exactly his words. He said that nothing in the Quran or in the Prophet's sayings is preventing women from running in the election or winning, from being voter or candidate or elected.
Political power is the ultimate for women, and they must get hold of it if they want power and they want to be participants in the decision-making process in government and every level.
I guess that we are satisfied in one way with the parliamentary system, that we have so many women in parliament. But of course, I think now we work for equal wages, that women should have the same wages as men and so on. So I think that's more what we are fighting for today.
Yes.
Do you think of something else?
Yes,
I think
I agree, yes.
And that we have the same opportunities as men in all different kinds of in the society. And I think also in the private sector, most of the companies are run by men. So I think there we have a lot to do. In the officials we are now dealing with the men, but I think in the private sector we have still a lot to do.
One thing I notice is that women's groups are willing to take on the government, the UN, the World Bank, but when it comes to the media, somehow we back away. Because we believe in freedom of the press. We believe in freedom of speech. But what we have to understand is just like we understood the difference between formal equality, that is when you have laws in your books banning discrimination, it doesn't mean that we have equality. We need positive measures to achieve equality. And we have to understand that formal freedom of the press, that is, the lack of government censorship or government control of the press, does not mean substantive and real freedom of the press. As long as a few corporations control the media, as long as oppositional voices have such little access to the media, as long as, and today, the few public, in the North, public broadcasters are one of the few places where occasionally you get alternate voices and they're under attack. As long as groups who are not in power are not represented, fully represented in the media, there is no real freedom of the press.
Mesdames, Mesdemoiselles,
ladies and gentlemen,
les femmes africaines,
African women are committing themselves to struggle toward gender equality, the principles of democracy and human rights,
à revendiquer
and we are making a commitment to demand to rebuild and change Africa, mobilizing and using the material and human resources available so that Africa will play the role it should in the concert of nations. Women want equal partnership with men, girls, and men. Thank you.
The Austrian Constitution guarantees equality between men and women, but we have found that that's just not enough to achieve real equality between women and men. And so there's a proposal that measures, sort of affirmative action measures to promote women to achieve de facto equality are not discriminatory. We are being accused that women are being favored with this proposal. We are saying the issue is to de-privilege men, to take away their privileges.
What should we fight for? What right do we have to fight to better the lives of the majority of Australian women when women in the region are suffering so much more obviously in so many ways? And we sat and we thought about that. And then we reminded ourselves that this conference is about the status of women, and affluence does not equal equality. In some cases we are in more comfortable cages. So we decided that that was something we had to remember. Yes, we are often more affluent, but we are not often more equal. And that is perhaps the commonality and one of the things we have to work together for.
So I ask and I demand from my government, stop ignoring women, Israeli women. Stop ignoring grassroots organizations. I ask you to help us. Thank you.
Until the swords turn into plowshares, until the children eat their fill, until the mansions admit the lowly, we have no cause for standing still. Oh, when the voices of conscience calling lead not to prison, but freedom's road, we'll see the false gods around us falling. It's then we'll harvest the seed we've sowed. Until the swords turn into plowshares, until the children eat their fill, until the mansions admit the lowly. We have no cause for standing still. Oh, when the voices of women singing are heard in houses of might and power, we'll hear the rafters around us ringing, we'll see a glimpse of our finest hour, until the swords turn into plowshares, until the children eat their fill, until the mansions admit the lowly. We have no cause for standing still. Oh, when the blood of black brothers flowing makes us weep tears for everyone, when the hatred's no longer glowing, we'll know the new world has just begun. Until the swords turn into plowshares, until the children eat their fill, until the mansions admit the lowly. We have no cause for standing still. We have no cause for standing still. We have no cause for standing still. Well done. Well done.
We have seen truly fantastic changes in the last 50 years. We cannot deny that. And they have opened up enormous opportunities for women and men. However, not everybody is benefiting from the globalization of the economy, and very many are in a worse position economically, socially and politically than before. The shortcomings of the globalization of the economy, as presently structured, are many, and I just want to mention three. That we could mention probably 33. One major shortcoming from my perspective is that countries in Latin America, in Africa, Asia, anywhere in the world, in Eastern Europe, cannot choose their road to development. They cannot decide which kind of development they would like for their people, assuming, of course, that they're willing to make a choice. This is particularly the case for countries that are severely indebted. And the debt crisis, in case anybody has forgotten, has not been resolved. A second major shortcoming is that the whole ethos of the global economy is to maximize and accumulate wealth, but not to distribute wealth. The ethos is short-term. There is very high mobility of capital. Companies can move from one country to another to avoid dealing in a situation where labor is more regulated, where there's a better labor code, or where there are better codes to protect the environment. And a huge problem in the global economy is that a major industry, the biggest industry in the UK, where I live, is the arms trade. How can we have equality, development and peace when our very economies are founded on production of military weapons? The third shortcoming I want to emphasize is that poverty is increasing around the world. There are 1 billion people living in poverty. The way in which the global economy is structured entrenches and reinforces existing inequalities within countries on the basis of gender, race, social group, and between countries, between the richer countries and the poorer. We now have a situation where there are very rich people in most countries and very many poor people in all countries.
Now we have come to question again, what is development? What does globalization mean? What do these processes mean? What does structural adjustment mean? What is adjusted by it?
I think the World Bank in particular is a really great example of a global institution that's played a key role in the processes that Vandana was describing earlier of greater integration, greater shifts from local and subsistence production to export-oriented production, which puts small producers, women much more at the mercy of markets millions of miles away. And while there's a great deal of recognition and awareness of the devastating impacts that structural adjustment policies promoted by the World Bank have had, and there are hundreds of very incredible presentations going on during the forum on those specific experiences in different contexts. And there's also a great deal of awareness and attention to the adverse impacts that specific projects funded by the World Bank, particularly large-scale hydroelectric dams, the Saror Sardavar in India, the Arun Dam in Nepal, two well-publicized examples of how destructive money that's lent by the World Bank can be, submerging large tracts of land often occupied by indigenous communities, often holding great amounts of biodiversity and other natural resources.
There's a multi-million gold project is coming up, and I would like to be aware of the environment in the place, because on the first stages of the project there's been destroying of environment, and I'm upset about it, and it would be interesting if I know something about it.
And mainly in Papua New Guinea, like my friend has told you, that we are more interested in environment, because in our country there's a lot of timber, like Japanese coming in and Chinese, and the environment for women is spoiled. So that's a big thing that we come to this world conference to learn more about environment and what other countries will tell us more about environment.
We are interpreters for the Russian delegation here in Beijing.
So how's the conference going for you? You've been having a good experience here?
Very, very interesting.
Right.
Health, environment, what impressed me most. It's nuclear danger, the threat of various toxins, and the effect on the health of women, children, humanity altogether, and what can women do about it together? How can we unite our efforts? That's what impressed me most so far. Yeah.
What are women talking about in Russia?
Oh,
various things. We have a lot of problems, and things are very different for different people. If before, under socialism, people lived pretty much the same, everybody. Now there's a great differentiation. There are problems of unemployment, poor health care. What else?
Poverty among women. Yes. That's a very, very bad problem among Russian women now.
Many young women are driven into prostitution because they want to get currency.
And alcoholism is a very bad problem also, because of unemployment and poverty, of course.
Now, Southeast Asia is a region where there is newly industrialized countries, and the economic position of these countries has led to many problems, including the disparity in terms of wealth and poverty. And wealth and poverty has been one burden, both wealth as well as poverty. Wealth brings its own diseases, brings its own problems for women.
Ironically, there would probably be little argument in this room that actually most decisions in the world today are not made by either nations or states, but are made by the 47 transnational corporations and their international financiers, whose annual income is larger than the gross national product for many countries in the world. This is the centerpiece of the problem. Decision-making is not made by those who are affected by decisions, people who live on the land, but by corporations with an interest that is entirely different than ours. This brings forth a fundamental question. What gives these corporations like Conoco, Shell, Exxon, Daiya Showa ITT, Rio Tinto Zinc, and the World Bank rights which supersede or are superior to the human rights of peoples, of my nation, my community, and us as women. What law gives that right to them? Not any law of the Creator or of Mother Earth. Is that right contained within their wealth? In their wealth which they have expropriated from us, immorally, unethically, through colonialism and imperialism?
The real answer, whether it's violence against women or the increasing poverty and marginalization of women, for example, lots of people are pleased with the global economy, but the global economy in my country has meant fewer full-time jobs with benefits such as health care, and more people working 2 jobs, trying to hold their families together, being attacked as the cause of the breakup of the family if the mother is the one who is raising the family and the father has disappeared, which happens often. The globalization means increasing poverty, and it means increasing burdens on the local municipal government.
Africa is not a poor continent. Africa has many human and natural resources. Africa's problem resides rather in the way in which its resources are exploited and managed, not only on the national and regional levels, but also in the context of the global economy. The advent of the new international order in this last decade had no positive effect at all upon most of the population in the world, and especially not in Africa.
Now, the World Bank that institutionalized structural adjustment programs that have increased global inequalities, increased the power of global corporations to levels that are totally unimaginable. They're beyond the rational imagination of any mind. Other areas of the total violation of any sense of limits in this era of corporate rule, where property is being constituted in life itself, is this brilliant new, there was a big debate that took place in the European Parliament for 3 years about whether life could be treated as a biotechnology invention. And they had worked this logic out, and you read the text, you'd never realize it's about living things, it's about living organisms, because they had absolutely sanitized the language into inventions. And we women along with cows and sheep that can give milk, were merely mammalian bioreactors. And we were invented. Luckily there have been, when I count on my fingers who are the activists around the obscenity of patenting life and claiming life to be made and owned, there are a handful of women activists around the world. Some of the work they've done is just tremendous. The work they've done on the impact of genetic engineering, for example, which the corporations have insisted on saying there's no issue of safety. There's no issue of environmental safety in genetic engineering. We've come up with the ultimately safe technology, the ultimate green technology. And the same corporations that would go to GATT and argue, we have made something new, therefore we need property rights, will go to the Biodiversity Convention and argue in the biosafety discussion, no, this is exactly as nature made it. There's nothing new about it. Don't look for new issues. So it's natural in biosafety where you get running away from responsibility, and it's totally novel and a new creation out of the blue when it comes to claiming absolute rights. That separation between rights and responsibility, to me, is the highest symbol of patriarchal power. If there's one thing that characterizes irresponsible power, it is when rights and responsibility don't hang together.
What have been some of the insights that we have got from the process that we have initiated in South Asia? One of the key features of our process has been that this process has challenged the concept of intellectual property rights. This process is not owned by any A organization within the country or any A platform within the region. It belongs to the very many women from all walks of life who contributed to it, shaped it, and gave it its direction. So to us, the strength of this process therefore means when there is subjective ownership of a process, it has elements of sustainability, replicability, strength for the future. The other part of that process was that we really believed in creating tolerance, in listening to each other. I think it was very important to build in that element of support, to build in the element of openness, to build in an element of transparency, because no processes can build until the various people involved in the processes are willing to listen to different points of view, are willing to learn from each other. I think the strength of our process lay that we believed in learning from each other, reflecting on each other's experiences, and believing that we had a long way to go before we would achieve anything very substantive.
Not for dogs. What do we want? Food rights. What do we want? Food rights. When do we want it? Now. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Food rights. When do we want it? Now. When do we want it? Now. Women take charge.
Where are you from? I'm from Zimbabwe. My name is Mili Fela, and I work for an international charitable organization that is Intermediate Technology Development Group.
What is Intermediate Technology?
It is a charitable organization that is trying to work with resource-poor communities to come up with appropriate technologies that would help those communities do better with the problems that they have. Here you can see we are on a stand where we have different varieties. These have been lost through some way, like droughts, like hybridization, but now we are encouraging farmers to come back to the, to the original and come back to the indigenous, the local varieties that they have. So it's one other technology that we are trying to encourage farmers to practice so that they keep to their normal way without interference from outside.
It's a supra-regional household energy project which improves the use of household energy in different countries of the world in the south.
Can you give me some examples?
Yeah, one example is the introduction of improved cook stoves, which means that in many parts of the world women have to care for firewood, mainly in all countries, and a lot of energy is wasted because many people use just open fires for cooking. And with the introduction of very simple stoves, even self-built stoves or stoves produced by local artisans, you can save up to 50% of the firewood. And the cooking has several implications. It has an implication on the environment because the fuel wood used comes from the forests. It has implication on health aspects because indoor cooking creates a lot of different diseases.
All India Women's Conference, and founded in 1921.
What is your name?
My name is Sarojini Varadappan. I am the patron of the All India Women's Conference. I was the president, but now I am the patron. You see, we introduced the wood stoves, modern, very easy for the women. These are all the models that we have kept. And the drudgery of the women we want to reduce, the grassroots level of rural women. And then we have introduced these stoves by which the fuel also will be saved and their drudgery also will be, less. Now we have taken up the solar. This is the solar lantern. You get the solar energy and then you switch it off. You get the light. 18 hours this will give light to the villager. And then we have the biogas plant. This is from the cattle cow dung.
It's a collaborative effort between some wheelchair riders all around the world. And we've come up with a design over here that can be made with very low technology. And as you can see, a lot of hand equipment. A lot of wheelchairs are donated around the world, but they don't do very well in rural conditions, and they tend to be very difficult to repair. Because it's been a collaborative effort by wheelchair riders, they know what they need the best. And by doing this kind of work in small factories all around the world, there's a lot more innovation that's possible than a high production factory.
Every region of the world is represented here. It's quite an extraordinary experience. One gets the feeling that it's kind of a microcosm of life for women itself, because it hasn't been easy. There are many obstacles. Anytime you get this many people together, of course, which is a real organizing challenge, there are bound to be problems. And they're not absent here in Wairo. But whenever I get discouraged, if I take a walk around here and get a sense of how women are responding to the challenges, it's very much like life itself. We seem to be able to have the flexibility and the resourcefulness and the creativity to reach above and around and beyond to make things happen.
Vencido, el pueblo unido jamás será vencido. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido.
Because life is stronger than death. We want
Rwanda, my country, is famous because of the genocide, because of the massacres. This young sister is widow because of the genocide.
Je suis encore jeune.
I'm young.
J'ai vu mes parents, j'ai vu mes amis, j'ai vu mon mari mourir à cause de l'injustice.
I have seen my husband, my parents, my friends dying because of the injustice.
Et je veux que toutes les femmes qui se trouvent ici se solidarisent avec nous.
And I want the solidarity of the women who are here, the solidarity with the Rwandan women.
Le monde a assisté au génocide sans rien faire.
The humanity, the world assisted to the genocide and doing nothing.
Les femmes ont assisté au génocide à la télévision sans rien dire, sans rien faire.
Women, you have assisted to the genocide and you said nothing.
Maintenant, à la veille de 2000 ans, nous voulons que les femmes se soulèvent. Nous voulons que les femmes se lèvent ensemble pour être ensemble, pour lutter contre toutes sortes d'injustices.
Now, going to the first century, I want all women to stand up as one woman to say no to the injustice and to focus to a better future for peace.
I'm speaking for Europe, for European peace women. I'm sorry to say we also have a genocide going on in Europe, and we have a war going on in Europe. Most of you will know perhaps it's in former Yugoslavia. That's not the only bad thing, I'm sorry to say. I have to tell you about Europe. We all know Europe on the whole is a rich country, but where does it come from, our richness? It's for a part, it's coming from the arms trade, and just all these arms we are selling or perhaps so-called giving also to developing countries. It makes that wars are going on and going on, because if really everybody would refuse to produce weapons, to sell weapons, to earn money with weapons, then perhaps peace would come a little nearer.
Military has been painted to us as protecting women and children, but the military has a very divided view of the world. There is one's own people and the enemy, and the women and children of the enemy can be treated as dirt, and anything can be done to the women and children of the enemy. So it's a very wasting kind of part of our society. I would like to mention in particular things like landmines, because long after a war is over, the mines that are planted in the field maim and destroy women and children and men. Some of the mines from World War II, 50 years ago, have still not been detonated, and they're sitting there waiting for a person to step on them. So it's time for women to wake up. It's time for us to say there is no military solution to human problems. The only thing that war does is bias negotiations. Every single dispute has to be negotiated. If you beat up the one person in the negotiation, you can bias it, but they will just sit back and wait for the next chance to make war. And so we have to stop it. We have to say, you don't get our sons and daughters. You don't get them for science and you don't get them for military action. We have to refuse to produce military equipment. We have to make our country stop selling it and stop buying it. It's no way to live on a small, fragile planet. Thank you.
The first strategy, ladies and gentlemen, is in relation to the promotion and sustenance of peace in Africa. The strategies identified include strengthening existing conflicts resolution committees by including women committed to and elected by the African Women Peace Movement and networks, to collaborate and network with the global peace networks to eradicate militarism, to inform, educate, and lobby for the elimination of conflict and militarism in Africa, to create an environment for peaceful coexistence among members within the household, members of our community, members of our nations, and between NGOs. The actions that we have proposed for the implementation of these strategies include the mobilization and conscientization of the civil society to provide peace in the households, in the communities, as well as within the nations. To advocate for the inclusion of peace studies in national curricula of formal and non-formal training institutions, to popularize and utilize traditional conflict resolution methods and systems.
Somos una región que ha sido azotada,
we are a region
no en las últimas
that
décadas, sino
has
como parte
been
de su historia, por las guerras,
harmed by
por las
wars,
invasiones,
by invasion,
que no han permitido hasta ahora
wars and
hacer
invasions
prosperar
that have not
propuestas
enabled
democráticas.
the democratic proposals
Somos
to
una región
prosper.
pobre, muy
We are a
pobre.
a very poor
Y no pobre de
region,
espíritu,
and we are not poor in
no
spirit.
pobre de
We are not
riquezas
poor in
potenciales
terms of the
materialmente
potential
hablando.
wealth that we
Somos
might have
pobres
in
porque
terms
hemos sido
of the
una
material
región
resources that we
expropiada,
might have. We are
una
poor
región
because
invadida,
we have been expropriated of our
una
goods. We
región que
have
no
been,
ha logrado
our region has been
consolidar
invaded.
procesos
Our region has
nacionales,
been unable to
que no ha
consolidate
logrado
national processes
consolidar, ni
and has
siquiera
been
iniciar
unable to consolidate
procesos
nor
democráticos.
even begin democratic
Recién
processes.
por decenas de
We
años.
have experienced
La dictadura han
dictatorships
sido
for
nuestros
decades.
más grandes
Dictatorships
principales
have
enemigos.
been our
La falta
worst
de
and greatest
democracia
enemies. The lack
que
of
se expresa en el
democracy,
Estado
which
también tiene una
exists
expresión real
and is
en la
expressed through the
sociedad
state, is
y lo
also
que es
expressed
peor
in
en la
society,
familia.
and what is worse
Allí
in
hemos aprendido
family.
la
We have
intolerancia,
seen the expression
exclusión,
of
la
intolerance,
agresión,
of
la
exclusion,
violencia.
aggression, violence in the family. Women are still in an inferior position vis-à-vis men. Men have many more resources at their commands, and thus it is that in terms of cultural and political, in the cultural and political spheres, men have the means to dominate women. This situation must be amended. Women who do not feel safe at home cannot act freely in society. So the personal statute laws must be amended. There must be a progressive, liberating vision that will inspire changes in all laws affecting women. Sisters, we want peace. We want a just and lasting peace. We do not want any temporary peace or that would be imposed by international agencies. What we want a real and lasting peace.
Will you sing your peace song?
Yes, I can do. Kerambwani bundenda Fianca pititani yabo hambwani kaba hambwani bundenda Fianca pititani yabo hambwani. That means what give the peace. For my country we have the plant where they call a peace plant. I bring it to here and they say who give the peace? They say that plant give the peace. And when there is war somewhere, before when there was war, a woman take the plant, then take it up, and the way the men see the plant, then stop the war. Fantastic.
I'm from Somalia. We have a proverb which is saying in our language, Nabad iya caano. Nabad iya caano. That means where there is a peace, there is a milk. We believe that if there is no milk, there is no life. So we say Nabad iya caano. Say with me, Nabad iya caano.
The Georgian is one of the unique languages in the world. It has 3,000 years, and we have one of the 14 alphabets which exists in the world. And the word for peace is Shvidoba. Shvidoba.
I come from Burundi, and in Burundi, peace has a very good place. When you meet somebody to say good morning or hello, we say a word which means peace. It means that every time you have to wish to the person you meet peace. So when we greet someone, you tell him a word that means peace. In Kirundi, the native language, we say amahoro. Repeat with me, amahoro.
I am from Wilf, Sri Lanka. In my language, the word for peace is Samaya. Samaya.
I come from Zimbabwe, and the fact that in Zimbabwe we have such reconciliation between the white and black people after a long war of liberation, I think there's something with our policy of reconciliation. And our word for peace is Runyararo.
Saddam, Iraq. You're very brave.
Adanati, Bedanati, Lasadalo,